Keir Starmer led MPs to the VE Day service in Westminster Abbey. The public were kept well away. 1 week after voters deserted the two main parties of the last 100 years of British politics, Keir Starmer hopes news from Washington might help him prove they shouldn't give up on his government. Donald Trump's ratings have been hit by his turbulent start in office. Each leader bigged up the other and the deal in a bizarre joint announcement. Donald Trump in the Oval Office, Keir Starmer at Jaguar Land Rover in Solihull.
This morning I'm thrilled to announce that we have reached a breakthrough trade deal with the United Kingdom. Incredible country. Today is a victory day for World War II. We won the war together exactly 80 years ago, so there could be no more perfect morning to reach this historic agreement, and it's beautiful weather out, I will tell you that, Keir.
To be able to announce this great deal on the same day, 80 years forward, almost at the same hour, and as we were 80 years ago, with the UK and the US standing side by side, I think is incredibly important and makes this truly historic.
What's actually been agreed in this trade deal is the 27.5% tariff announced for UK cars is reduced to 10%, but only for the first 100,000 cars Britain exports. That's about the current level of exports. The 25% tariff the US had announced on all steel imports is, for the UK, cut to zero. The 10% tariff remains on all other UK exports to the US. Both countries are allowing in more beef from each other's farmers, but Britain is not changing its food standards that ban hormone-treated beef.
With respect, are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal? Because you're a president who needs a result.
But this is a maxed out deal, not like you said it. You said it really incorrectly. This is a maxed out deal that we're going to make bigger.
Donald Trump has been struggling to land his arguments on tariffs. Have we been bounced into this by a president that needs help out of a hole?
No, not at all. Our teams have been hard at work for weeks on end. I've wanted to get a deal over the line. I make no, I'm not ashamed of that. I wanted because I knew how important it was, particularly for JLR, that we got a deal, that we got it over the line, and we got it over the line in a timely manner.
JLR's chief executive gave the sort of endorsement Donald Trump normally gets on camera from his own cabinet members.
In the last hour, I've witnessed your discussion with President Trump, where you finalised that deal. On behalf of 45,000 people in this company, 250,000 jobs we support in this country, thank you.
Donald, thank you so much. It's really good to have got this deal over the line. Tribute to both teams, tribute to our countries, and tribute to your leadership.
Thank you. Well, it really is a great thing. And you go do your press conference, and I'll see you soon. Maybe speak to you later.
The British ambassador had his hand squeezed. Back in Solihull, Keir Starmer said today proved charm worked better than aggression.
I'm really proud we have, and I know people along the way were urging me to walk away, to descend in a different kind of relationship. We didn't. We did the hard yards. We stayed in the room.
In my view, as the Prime Minister has said, just shows what two countries who trust each other, who are confident in each other and are familiar with each other can do, not just for ourselves, but for the rest of the world who need to benefit from a bigger and better international trading system.
Thank you very much. It was beautifully stated. What a beautiful accent, too. I'd like to have that accent. Thank you.
My mother would be proud.
1 month after Donald Trump convulsed the world with his giant tariff wall, the world watched to see how much the first country to the table could truly bring down that wall.
We are absolutely still firmly in the new world. The US has made it clear that it plans to continue using access to its market, and so tariffs, as a lever of power. That has not changed. The UK has managed to sort of buy itself a bit of a reprieve from part of that.
The biggest problem with the deal that's been done is the question of how permanent it is, how reversible some bits may be, or whether there will be new things that come in later that are very difficult for us. I mean, as it's been negotiated In this last few days, we have the threat on films, which would be a big, big impact for our film industry. And who knows what else could come up in the next couple of years.
Both leaders probably overclaimed this VE Day anniversary deal. Ever since the Brexit referendum, a full fat US-UK trade deal has been promised. What was produced today was a far cry from that. But for Keir Starmer, a timely offering to two industrial sectors in jeopardy. Limited good news, but he'll take that.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to the Business and Trade Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, and I asked him what he thought of the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, saying the UK's been shafted.
Well, I think some people should take Kemi's phone off her sometimes and not let her tweet things. But what we have announced today is about saving thousands of jobs in the UK. It's not the end of the process. There's still an ongoing negotiation with the US about the reciprocal tariffs.
This is not a trade deal, is it?
Right, it's the start. It's the start of it. You're right to say that.
I mean, Trump says this is because of Brexit. I mean, this is the Brexit bonus you found at last, isn't it?
Oh, look, the trade deals we've been able to announce with India this week, the breakthrough with the US, yes, that's because I, as the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, can negotiate that. I will always push back on anyone who says the UK has to pick between Europe and the US and India or any other
But
market.
are you sure Europe won't be cross about this and won't actually take out its own retaliation against us?
The EU absolutely knows that the UK will pursue its own national interests as they will pursue the EU interest. No one's going to negotiate for the UK other than the UK government, other than us.
The farmers are very worried, though. I mean, they are worried that you've sacrificed arable farmers with allowing in ethanol from America into the UK market.
Well, look, what we have agreed in relation to that big change, that big advantage we've got on sectoral tariffs, are some changes in terms of additional access for the US on beef that complies with our food standards, on ethanol, where there's already a significant amount of US exports to the UK. That will
But
just
that's a threat to British farmers, isn't it?
No, I think, look, that is a fair and reasonable adjustment. Of course, it means cheaper ethanol in the UK, but it's a big ask on the US side. But look, trade deals, you've got to have a bit of give and take. You're not going to get everything you want without having some reciprocity across the board.
I mean, you said this was about jobs, but I mean, there were jobs at Grangemouth that you could have saved if you'd have done there what you've done at British Steel, and that one of its products is ethanol. I mean, now we're going to be importing American ethanol while the British plant goes bust.
We're going to be importing the same ethanol from the US we have. It'll just be cheaper because it'll be tariff-free. It's currently subject to a tariff between 10 and 50%, depends how you use it for. On Grangemouth, the situation was different. The UK government has pledged a significant amount of money in relation to the future of the oil refinery at Grangemouth, £200 million from the UK government, because that was about finding a future use for it.
Now, on steel, Mr. Lutnick says Britain is nationalising steel and is basically going the same way as the Americans on tariffs. He's implying you told them that Britain's going to put up tariffs on steel from other countries. Is that right?
Well, look, first of all,
that you're
I can tell you that the decisions we took on British Steel were only about the UK national interest.
Yeah, but is he right when he says that?
It did attract a lot of interest in the US. I think they were impressed by our decisiveness and our activity, but there was no relationship to this trade negotiation specifically that we took that action in relation to British Steel. That was what we did in the UK national interest.
But did you tell them that you're nationalising British Steel?
We didn't tell them in advance of what we were doing when we recalled Parliament and took control. The issue around ownership we still need to resolve either on a consensual basis with British Steel or by some other route. And I have said public ownership is the likely step we will have to take in order to progress the situation at British Steel.
Two big areas, unresolved, obviously. First of all, pharmaceuticals. What does preferential position mean?
Well, it means obviously there's been speculation that the US may seek to put in place on pharmaceuticals the kind of sectoral tariffs it has announced in relation to other areas. We obviously needed some reference to it. Now, because they haven't put in place those tariffs yet, they can't promise us a certain course of action because the announcement hasn't been made. We wanted to have some reference to that because we're dealing with sectoral tariffs and there will be ones in future that would be of concern to us, and we want to recognise that in the agreement we struck.
Bottom line, we may be better off than we were yesterday. We're still worse off than we were last year, aren't we? The Trump tariffs still make it harder for British exporters.
The world, as it was a year ago, doesn't exist anymore. It's not available. I can only deal with the here and now. The government can only deal with the here and now. And the here and now was we were at risk of thousands of job losses in some of our most important industries, iconic businesses. We had to take action in our national interest to do that. This is what the government's agenda is about, and we're going to continue pursuing that with every available partner to get the maximum potential deal for the UK.
John Reynolds, thank you very much. Well, the Prime Minister promised that the deal would save thousands of jobs in Britain's car and steel industry, while the Farmers Union welcomed parts of the agreement, but said beef and bioethanol producers were bearing a heavy burden. So how will this impact the UK economy, especially given this morning's rate cut by the Bank of England and fears over a slowdown in growth? Our economics correspondent Helia Ebrahimi reports.
Good news on trade, good news on interest rates. But what a palaver to get there. The name of the British fashion brand, Palaver, seems to also be stitched across most of the UK economy.
So this one's called Chips Away, so it's all a British seaside.
The clause of a full-blown trade war may have been slightly retracted, but the assessment of the UK economy from the Bank of England is one of a fragile country where companies and households are nervous. The steel and the car industry may have been given a carve-out today, but for businesses like Bryony's, US tariffs remain at 10% and still pose a threat.
It's very hard to grow a business under these circumstances where everything is changing all of the time. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. You don't know what the next year is going to look like. And that just makes it very tricky to feel confident about growing a business.
Are you frustrated with politicians?
Yes, you could say that, yes.
Lower interest rates will help homeowners and businesses, but when you focus in on the details, the UK economy looks weaker. Interest rates were cut to 4.25%, but business investment growth was halved from 3% to 1.5%, while export growth vanishes altogether from 2.5% to 0%. While the Prime Minister and President Trump were congratulating each other on their tariff deal, the Governor of the Bank of England warned it wasn't just the deal with the UK that matters.
It doesn't solve it. It's good news. I'm very pleased, and it's good news, and congratulations to everybody involved. But we do need to see, trade deals with the rest of the world, and that's important for the UK because the UK is a very open economy.
And what about the impact of recent turmoil on UK businesses?
The world is a more uncertain place. We've had very big shocks going on in the world. And so I think it is a more difficult operating environment for many companies at the moment. And I think the more we can do, and things like the trade agreement help it, but it's a bigger picture than that sense. The more we can do to reduce uncertainty and give people greater confidence, the better.
And you're talking a lot about imbalances lately. It seems to be in vogue. You're adopting a bit of the president's language on that. Do you agree with his economic worldview?
Well, I don't agree with this view that all trade has to be in balance. That's not the way trade works.
On China, do you agree with President Trump's view that China presents a threat?
China is developing very rapidly, has developed very rapidly. I think we have to make sure that the Chinese are part of what I would call the international system and they engage with us. And then we have to be quite direct with them at times, as we are, and say, look, there's a problem here. So, if there is a structural imbalance, then we have to say to the Chinese, and we have to be able to say to the Chinese.
And do you say it to them?
Yes, we do. Sorry. To be in the world system, this is what we have to tell you, I'm afraid.
There are hard truths for Britain too in this new world order, dictated not just by China, but the USA and its new vision of how trade needs to look.
Well, our senior political correspondent Paul McNamara is at the Jaguar Land Rover factory in the West Midlands, where Keir Starmer unveiled the tariff deal earlier. Paul.
Yeah, there is a palpable sense of relief here tonight, not just at Jaguar Land Rover, but across businesses and business groups across the West Midlands. There are still tariffs, but the line I've heard repeated to me a number of times this afternoon is that for this region, a quick deal is better than a perfect deal. It's no surprise that Keir Starmer chose here for his announcement. The West Midlands sells more to the US than any other region in the UK. Okay, and the vast majority of those businesses are relying on here. There are many smaller parts makers and manufacturers that are all relying on here. For 4 weeks, Jaguar Land Rover suspended all exports to the US. I spoke to workers earlier on, they were telling me they were genuinely nervous. There were sleepless nights because of how important the US market is. Tonight, their jobs feel a little bit safer. So the question is, well, just how long can they breathe easy for? That's what I asked the Prime Minister about earlier on.
Afternoon, Prime Minister. Look, business needs certainty. President Trump is no stranger to changing his mind on a whim. What assurances can you give business, give the workers here, that despite what you've agreed today, we're not all going to wake up to a post tomorrow that effectively rips all that up?
Well, we've been negotiating this text for a long time. I had discussions with Donald Trump along the way, including discussions last night. We're clearly in agreement. There is a written text. This is reduced to writing. That text will be available. So this is an agreement that is absolutely clear. We've worked well together. We respect each other, the President and I, and we trust each other and have trusted each other through this process.
So trust and a written agreement is what it all comes down to for the Prime Minister, and hope is what it all comes down to for thousands upon thousands of workers across the West Midlands.
Thanks, Paul. Well, in the past few minutes, our Washington correspondent Siobhan Kennedy has managed to grab a few words with Donald Trump. Siobhan.
I know, amazing as that may sound, Christian, as I was standing here waiting to speak to you, so the President popped up behind me. We all rushed over. He first of all said that he had been watching the news, the announcement about the Pope, and when he heard that it was an American, what great news, he said. He said it was a great, great honour for America. I did take the opportunity to ask him about the US trade deal that he announced this morning that he said was an incredible deal. But while it might seem like a good deal for US beef farmers, I asked him, what about chlorinated chicken? Because it does seem that a deal has not yet been struck to enable American chicken to go into the British market. Let's hear what the President had to say to me. Mr. President, are you sure that the UK will take American chlorinated chicken? That deal has not been done yet.
What is that?
Are you sure that the UK will take American chlorinated chicken? That deal has not been done yet.
We're changing all of that, but we have it both ways. We have it both ways.
Well, we have it both ways, he says. He seems optimistic, but earlier I also caught up with the Agriculture Secretary who was wandering around here, and she did admit that chlorinated chicken, that deal had not yet been done. Let's just run what I backwards and forwards with her.
But there's no question that the poultry and beef is 100% safe from America. And we have the most stringent EPA regulations for too long, not just in the UK, but around the world. Countries have used that as what we call a non-tariff trade barrier. And the recognition that we have really produced and continue to produce the safest in the world is of utmost importance.
So it's not 100% definite, but you hope those products will be sold?
Our beef, I know, is moving out under the current negotiation and the current agreement. I think the other poultry, fish, etc., are still in the pipeline with big agreements to come in the next few days, if not the next few weeks, and those conversations will continue.
Well, it's very clear that Donald Trump wanted to have a big deal announced today ahead of his team going to Switzerland this weekend to open discussions with China, and as other teams here are close to finalising, we're told, deals with South Korea and Japan. Donald Trump wanted to make clear today that he could get one big deal over the line. I do still think it looks more like a framework than a free deal, given the UK is still going to be charged 10% on goods. So, you know, there's still very much to be done here.
Siobhan Kennedy in Washington. Well, with me here are Ray Newton-Smith, Director General of the Confederation of British Industry, and Tom Bradshaw, who's President of the National Farmers Union. Tom, it sounds like the Americans think rather more of their food is coming to Britain than the British government is suggesting. Are you grateful or worried?
Well, there seems to be a lot of hyperbole on one side of the Atlantic, and yet we're being told very clearly that our standards have been stuck to within the deal. There was those red lines about the high animal health and welfare standards we produce our food to here. The government has stuck firm to that, which is something that we do welcome within this deal.
But Trump is saying that Robert Kennedy's going to change all of that. He just told Siobhan Kennedy that they were going to change chlorinated chicken and that they were going to get things both ways.
Well, the facts as we know them today are that there's 13,000 tonnes of beef which is going to be allowed into our market. We have reciprocal access back, which was another key point that we wanted within the negotiation, was that reciprocal access back to the US market. Unfortunately, we are learning that there will still be some tariffs on our beef exports to the US. So we've dropped them for the US government for the food that comes in, but they will be applying tariffs to our beef exports.
Ray Newton-Smith, is this a boost to British industry or just less pain?
Well, I think if you put this alongside the deal with India as well this week, I think we've shown that the government have been able to secure really important trade deals. And of course, in the case of the US, it is about making sure we weren't in the world we could have ended up at the beginning of April. Because let's be honest, if some of those tariffs had stayed in place against the UK economy, particularly around steel or the car industry, it could have been existential for some of those industries and businesses.
But are we still net negative, or is this net positive?
Look, I think make no mistake, the tariffs that Trump has imposed against the entire world is absolutely detrimental to the world economic outlook. But I think what's really important is today the UK have secured a better deal for our industries, and it's really important that this is the beginning and not the end, and it's critical, and we've been very clear that our farming community had to be part of that, and we had to uphold the high standards we have in our farming industry. And I think as the more details come forward from the deal, it's really important that we get better access, particularly around the pharmaceutical industry. It's so important that life-saving medicines can move across borders.
Yeah, I mean, that's all still to be resolved, isn't it?
Well, our understanding is we will see more good news on that coming out in the coming days, and that will be critical.
Even though the Americans haven't said what they're going to do.
Look, as we know, when you see deals agreed, that you always see the headlines at the beginning, the heads of terms, and then the details do come out in following
Right, so you're sounding very optimistic.
So I think we have to take this as a really positive step forward in the trading relationship between the US and the UK, certainly from how it felt where we were a few weeks ago, and that's a real positive. And there's more to be done, of course, in our relationship with the rest of Europe. So hopefully this will also be a way in which we can see more of these deals coming forward that will be important for the whole world economy.
Tom, your union put out sort of a pretty alarmed statement about arable farmers in terms of the production of ethanol, bioethanol. What's your worry?
Well, absolutely. We produce bioethanol here. We've got two plants up in the northeast that produce bioethanol from crops produced in this country as well as imported corn. We don't know if that industry will be viable with the tariffs we moved on the bioethanol industry or bioethanol exports from the US. So that's something that we're trying to work through the detail of that, because if it's not viable, then there will be that market will disappear, so there'll be less demand for the product produced. But we still have to remember, even with this deal, there's still 10% tariffs in place on most of our exports to the US. So we're still in a worse position than we were on the 1st of April. And yet we've given away access to our food market, which is something that's been a prize they've been after for decades or more.
Do you think they've given away too much then?
Well, look, given the place the economy was in, we understand how difficult this has been. We really welcome the fact they've upheld the standards. We cannot burden any more responsibility as the agricultural industry when we try to negotiate away those tariffs that are still in place.
Do you understand what Kemi Badenoch's on about when she says we've been shafted?
I mean, that seems a very strong reaction, given where the country has been facing into those tariffs. We had lines around standards. We needed reciprocal access. We've got that. We have concerns about ethanol, but we cannot expect the food and farming industry to burden any more responsibility as we try to negotiate away the tariffs that are still in place.
What do you make of that claim that we've been, the government's given away far too much and got
I think we have, particularly today, and today is VE Day, we have to recognise this has been a moment in which we've seen better collaboration between the US and the UK than where we were 5 or 6 weeks ago.
You're not concerned that Europe will factor that in to our negotiations with them? I mean, there's always been this fear that if we get preferential terms with the Americans, the Europeans will take it out on us.
I think the UK government is well aware that we are also very much looking forward to later this month you know, the EU summit, and hopefully we can be in a position where we start to see better integration in our relationship with Europe, which is such a critical market for us. And so I think we have to see this as the beginning, and hopefully we will see India, the US, and a closer relationship with the EU, and some better access and alignment on mobility, about how people move across borders to provide some of the services that really keep our economy going. And I think we can do these trade negotiations in sequence. And I think that's so critical that we do. It's so important for our economy, for the growth. There's so much mutual
And we haven't
interest.
even talked about the movie industry, but that's another day. Ray Newton-Smith and Tom Bradshaw, thank you both very much indeed.